What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Sheehan Show. Me, Sean Sheehan, here on Sherdog.com, and I am back with my top 5 bets for the week in the world of mixed martial arts. And it's a busy weekend. We have PFL Friday, UFC Saturday, as is the case around this time of the year. I suppose the double weekends for 4 weeks in a row now, which is pretty good. Very good PFL card. And not a bad UFC card either, all things told. You know, I was talking on the podcast there in the last 2 weeks, I think. We were saying, like, are these cards good? Or were the cards that were happening for the last 2 years, like, so average that now, like, a slightly above average card we call good? I don't know. Either way, maybe a bit of positivity isn't bad anyway. But, yeah, I've split my bets in the middle. 2 bets from PFL, 2 bets from the UFC, and in the flyer as well, which we will get to. It's a flyer you've seen already this year, so that might be a bit of a spoiler, but we'll go over it again. Speaking of flyers, we hit one last week. It was only the second flyer of the year. We're 2 for 18, but what a bet. Kamaru Usman to win by decision, plus 550 last week. A brilliant bet. I feel like, oh, sure, I pick those sort of bets all the time. Yeah, no problem. That was an easy bet to pick, but I liked Usman to win. I said it. I think he was plus 220 to win straight out. Now, he mightn't have been that when the fight went off, but when I was looking at it last week, that was the price he was, and I said I liked that price as well. He fought even better than I thought. It was. I tweeted out, I think Aaron Bronstetter, friend of the show, tweeted out as well. It was vintage Kamaru Usman, and what a performance. And like, I think everyone probably knew, maybe not everyone, but I think a lot of people knew that he was a better fighter than Joaquin Buckley. It was just whether he still had it or not, and I think he showed in that fight he definitely still had it. Like, sometimes a guy comes back and they beat a guy, let's say Usman versus Buckley-ish fight, where one guy's ceiling is way above the others, and, you know, they might be at 80 or 70%, they still win. But I actually think Usman, maybe not 100%, but not too far from it. I think he was that good. That's how impressed I was with him. And, like, that makes me want to see him versus Ian Gary. I'd love that fight. But him versus Bilal, I saw a few people suggesting. I think there's some very good fights there with him. But more importantly, we won that bet last week, plus 550. And I'll tell you what, it was a great week all around for the Sheehan Show bets. We hit that one, and then we were 3 of 4 on the other bets. The one we didn't hit was Jeremy Kennedy plus 163. Again, a pretty close fight, and, you know, betting the price on that one, you know, it's not a bet I regret. I know why I picked it, and he was very, very close to winning it. The other 3, I'd feel more comfortable with my pick on that one than I would with my pick on Carlos Vamola. I gave it as my lock, my definite for last week. Very lucky. If you betting this, you won at minus 150. But this fight did not go the way I expected at all. It was a rock'em sock'em robots type of fight for 5 rounds. He almost got finished. I actually think the fight should have been finished, but he ended up winning the decision in the end. But great fight. If you haven't seen that over in Octagon, him and Attila Vey put on a barn burner of a fight. The other 2 bets, Namunas fight decision. I think that was pretty straightforward, minus 145. The only thing that almost stopped it was Maverick getting that injury, and, you know, she had the submission on at one stage as well, but that submission, in my opinion, wasn't very close. But yeah, I think that was pretty straightforward, minus 145 bet. And then we had plus 180, pretty good price on Tad Jean, who beat Jason Jackson. Again, I bet the price. I thought it was a pick'em fight. It was a pick'em fight. Either guy could have won it. I think the breakdown of that was pretty good. And when the fight is that close, what do you do? If someone's plus 180, you have to bet the plus 180. And that's what we did. And Alfie Davis, spoiler alert, Tad Jean won last week. So, all in all, 3 for 4 last week, 1-1 from the flyer, 46 from 90. So we're gone over the 50%, which I'm delighted with. And the second flyer hit from 18 shows so far this year. Let's get into the bets. And I spoiled it for you there, so I might as well give it to you again. Bet number 1 of the week is Alfie Davis at plus 170 in his fight with Brent Primus this weekend. I've been a big fan of Alfie Davis for a very, very long time. Watched some of his early fights. If you listen to the preview show, I spoke a lot about this, but, you know, he's just one of those guys that I saw at an early age, and I'm thinking this guy has something different about him, something a little bit special. Like, you know, sometimes you see guys in their world legit athletes, and, you know, you see it again, say someone like even Dara Kelly's fighting this weekend. You know, win or lose this weekend, I think Dara's such a good athlete that he could lose 2 or 3 fights in a row, and I'd still have a lot of hope in him. Say that someone like an AJ McKee who would be similar, or a Junior Dos Santos back in the day, or a Rafael Dos Anjos, guys who just have some innate physical ability that you think. But Alfie Davis is one of those guys I just always thought he was tricky and smart. Bryn Primus is a little bit like that as well, in a different way. I think, funny enough, AJ McKee has a bit of both of them. He's kind of like that as well, tricky, but he's more tricky on the feet. And, fighting out of that amazing London shoot fighters gym where they have amazing grappling there, but they also have the likes of MVP with amazing striking as well. And to me, Alfie Davis is a real MMA fighter, right? He's a real blend of a bit of everything. Now, you see most of it with his striking and his tricky strikes. We saw the spinning back elbow in the last fight against Clay Collard. And look, there's a couple of reasons I'm going for him in this one. Bryn Primus came out and he looked really good against Cincy last time out and beat him. I think Cincy in that fight, I think I picked him as a flyer maybe going into that fight. And he could have won it, but I just think the game plan was pretty bad, and that there was a lot of grappling and stuff. And if you grapple, and this goes for Alfie Davis, or no matter who it is, apart from maybe Ghazi Rabadanov, if you grapple against Bryn Primus, you're onto a loser straight away. But Alfie Davis is the type of guy I think who will, and this is the key, he will strike with Bryn Primus, but he will strike with him fluently. Like a lot of people that go into a fight with Primus, or you see it with, against NCAA wrestlers and things like that, and they're striking just turns and changes, and they're going, instead of doing their straight up, straights, lefts, straights, backhands, hooks, whatever they might be, in their upright stance or their karate stance or their bladed stance, they're fighting like front forward and, just trying to stop the takedown, real wide base and throwing uppercuts and stuff. Alfie Davis won't do that. He'll fight in his normal fashion, but he's so used to fighting in his normal fashion, it only works because he's made it work for him. And he's not a guy who's like easily taken down or easily brought to the ground. He's also, one thing I really love about Alfie Davis that we don't see a whole lot, like when he does get into like scramble situations after a takedown, let's say if it's gone bad, or takedown situations or clinch situations, he's very fast to get out. Like he's really good at like just pushing a lad away, getting back to what he's good at. Now, that's not always the case. Sometimes you will get caught in a clinch for 30 seconds, 90 seconds, 5 minutes, whatever it might be. But generally, he's pretty good at that. And I think that's a real key against Bryn Primus, because like Primus really, like he's good at wrestling and he's brilliant jiu-jitsu when the fight gets to the ground. But like most of his takedowns, I would say, are opportunistic. Like, it's in a clinch when a guy stays there for 30 seconds too long and he kind of pulls guard and either ends up in the bottom or on top and gets some sort of submission. You need to be very worldly wise against him. And I think a guy like Alfie Davis is really set to be worldly wise against a guy like Primus. He's also been in there with some good guys over the last few years. His last 2 fights, Collard and Barnaby. Now, he lost the Barnaby fight, but, he almost went the full 3 rounds, and that's pretty high level stuff to be in there. He's also fought Shabley over 3 rounds, fought Tim Wilde over 3 rounds. Other really good guys like Daniel Scatizzi, Akon Wallace was a top prospect at the time as well. So, I just think on the feet, I think Alfie Davis will have the advantage, and I think he'll be able to do enough to keep the fight off the ground. He's only been submitted once in his career. Granted, that was the Barnaby fight 2 fights ago, but in general, he's pretty good on the ground. 3 submissions himself. Primus is a very, very good fighter as well. I have a lot of respect for Primus. Spoke to him last year, and he's a really nice guy as well as a really good fighter. But I like Alfie Davis to win the fight straight up. And when you give me that price at a plus 170, I'm going to have to take that, to be fair. Right, the other one I'm going to go over, and I said about a couple of fights that I was going to avoid him in the preview show, but there's one I thought a little bit more about it, and the guy who I picked in the preview show is the guy I'm going to be betting on because he is the underdog, and I was kind of thinking to myself, I pick him. He's my pick. Like I'm pretty confident in him winning. Now that doesn't mean much. Someone could zig and zag a different way. Someone come out a different game plan and it all goes differently. But I'm going for Mando Gutierrez at plus 160. Let me just check that price again now, just to make sure it's 100% right. Plus 164, sorry, plus 164 to win his fight against Justin Wetzel. Do you know what? Talked a lot about this, obviously, on the preview show, but you know, both of these guys obviously had an amazing start to the season. You know, Wetzel went in there against Kasimov on short notice. You know, obviously Kasimov was supposed to fight my countryman Kieran Clark, and Kieran got injured, unfortunately. And on it wasn't that short of notice, maybe 3 weeks notice or something like that. Wetzel came in and he won the fight, and he looked really good in doing it the way he did it, you know, with guts and glory, let's put it that way. And then Gutierrez, even more guts, even more glory against Francisco Nuzzi, ended up winning that fight when he took, I suppose, a lot of damage in the fight. But, you know, if you're to look at the two of them and kind of the way they fight and the way they line up, you know, whereas I said this in the previous show, Wetzel, okay, it's easier to explain Gutierrez, I think, to someone, right? Gutierrez is a guy who will wade forward and take shots and put his body on the line because he knows he can take maybe shots that you can't take, you know, and he fights out of southpaw, which is more tricky for a person. Now, Wetzel fights out of southpaw as well, so maybe that's not the case here. Although I've heard people talking before about southpaws hating fighting southpaws, but, you know, he eats a lot of shots against Nuzzi. He had a lot of jabs through the middle, but he's a finisher. He's a great guillotine. We've seen him get the rear naked choke, obviously, in the last one. He's been in there against some good guys. Well fought Raul Rosas. You know, I think he's a tad underrated. In the last fight against Nuzzi, like, Nuzzi is a better fighter than him on paper, but he went in there and he won, and that says a lot. And I think to do that against Nuzzi, I think it's maybe harder to do it against Nuzzi than it is against Wetzel. Like, Wetzel is not the technician that Nuzzi is. Like, the issues that Wetzel brings is he's very big for the weight. He trains with, not under, trains with Corey Sandhagen. So he's a bit odd and a bit tricky as well. He targets the body a lot. He's not afraid to throw. And he does, I said this in the previous show as well, but he does a really good thing. And please check out that previous show. When it gets too tough for him out wide, he clinches very well. And what I mean by that is, like, he'll throw a few shots. If they're good, he'll keep throwing. If his opponent lands even one or two and he thinks he's like, okay, the tide is turning maybe a little bit, he'll clinch you at just the right time. Against Gutierrez, in that Nuzzi fight and in other fights as well, I talked about Alfie Davis a little bit like this as well. He's very good at kind of getting out of those clinch situations and, you know, being rough in those clinch situations as well. Like, an in-your-face fighter, not the greatest athlete in the world again, but finds a way to win. And again, he is also, Gutierrez is a great guillotine. Wetzel is a great guillotine as well. You know, look, they're both guys that find a way to win. Let's be honest. But I think you look at this fight and you look at what Gutierrez was able to do to Nuzzi. And, like, with all due respect to Wetzel, and I said this a minute ago, like, he's not as good a technician as Nuzzi, but, like, it's almost like these two guys are built to beat the better technicians, right? These two guys, like, run over the flash stands, the guy who's 10-0, 11-0, and has, you know, never taken a knockdown or, you know, never fought any adversity. That's adversity in his career. And now you find those two guys in there against, like, these two guys are not supposed to fight each other, really. And I just think maybe the guy who has a bit more class, maybe a bit more power, and maybe, again, I said the word about Gutierrez, a bit underrated. I think maybe the class will tell in a fight like that. So let's see. But again, the price here sways me. He was my pick. The price being plus 164. You know, I kind of had to go for it. So that is that.